Okay, I think that we will start and people will just walk in. So this is my great pleasure to welcome Duncan Crowley today as the speaker. Duncan is an Irish architect and climate activist exploring community-led ecocities through action research in Dublin, Barcelona, Curitiba, and Lisbon. He's now speaking to us from Lisbon. He works with the urban project Ecolis, did I pronounce it correctly? Which is a European network for community-led initiatives on climate change and sustainability, and their Communities for Future Action platform. He's a PhD candidate in architecture of contemporary metropolitan territories in Lisbon, and holds a master's degree in environment and development from UFPR in Curitiba, Brazil. He's a co-founder of Barcelona's transition group and has a permaculture design certificate and was part of 2011 Indignado Square occupations. Good for you. He's part of CE3C and another unpronounceable thing, research groups, and participates in DEAL, which is Doughnut Economics Action Lab, and the Portuguese Degrowth Network. Welcome, Duncan. He will be, I don't know the title of your presentation. I give it to you, Duncan. Welcome very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Scorai and everybody involved in just setting my clock here. Yep. So thank you very much, Helena and Olive Scorai, for giving me the opportunity to share some of the insights of some of the work that's going on. And yeah, so sorry, some of those research groups are a bit strange with their pronunciation. So the topic we're exploring today is community-led ecocity transformation, developing an urban systems community of practice ecosystem. And so yeah, as you said, I'm Irish, based in Lisbon, after some years living in Curitiba, Brazil, and Barcelona before that. And I work, and some of the work we'll be talking about how the worlds of activism and academia can come together and support and learn from each other and to help change things for the better. So there's some of the links there. So I'll just go straight on through the presentation, and I'm going to speak for about a half an hour, and then we'll be into open discussion. So hopefully a lot of people will understand and it can make sense. So, sorry now, just need to move this. Okay. So these are the steps I'm going to be taking you through today in exploring this topic. Okay, so to start off, I'm also working on the regenerative development course with Regeneration, and just it's been a very intense week with St. Patrick's Week, the Irish feast days and turning things green and green actions and all this. But I was doing a piece, and I'd just like to share some of that to start off with. And this is very much work in progress, so apologies. It starts off in our own Indigenous language in Oscailga. So, ag siúl go dtí an sail, le evenes, walking toward life with joy. And oh, I need to stop. Do I need? No, I don't need. Okay, so a guiding question asked within the Regenesis dialogues was, what does it mean to be Indigenous again today? Far from giving answers, this question opens up a very wide and deep dialogue about what is, what was, what could yet be. Emerging concepts relating to living in harmony with nature appear to be new, but in fact, their core idea is nothing new at all. Much of these emerging systems simply reconnect all of us to ideas, visions, and values held by all our families at some stage in the past, regardless of who we are today, what we are, where we are born, or where we live now, on this little planet. And this work is for Cloughjordan Ecovillage in Ireland. But talking about this theme of rivers as just one of these parts, one very important old spiritual attitude was to see rivers as gods and goddesses and to value the true worth of that most magic of entities of this earth, water, or ishka, as it's pronounced in the Gaelic language. Similar to how the old Chinese spiritual attitude saw it, the Tao, that which flows through all things, stemming from something formless and perfect before the universe was born. Taking a lead from current Andean traditions in Peru and surrounding countries, La Pachamama is venerated as a natural female goddess entity, Mother Earth. The god is not an abstract and male entity disconnected from the here and now who passes moral judgments. The god is that which we are part of in a glorious whole, the mother from which we are born. It's not a question of belief or not. It's simply recognizing the natural laws of existence, living with nature and being aware of the utter beauty and magic and strangeness of it all. The old Irish attitude to rivers understood this. To stand in the river, to drink it, was to be it, to be moved by it, to allow for the world of magic and spirit seep into your soul. The Maoris in New Zealand have a super phrase, kau aute awa kau te awa kau au, meaning I am the river and the river is me. After 140 years of negotiation and battle in the legal systems, in 2017, a Maori tribe won a court case which has opened a new precedent, recognizing river basins as living entities with same legal rights as human beings.
Wow.
Cloughjordan, yeah? Hello? Okay, sorry, Cloughjordan has an incredible potential for infinite ripples to allow a regenerative culture to emerge at all scales, in the town, in Tip, in the full island of Ireland, and the wider world. To grow its vitality, viability, and capacity for evolution, some of the following goals could be considered. Create river guardians groups for communities living within Ballyfinboy and Shannon basins. Use the Maori Wainganui River legal precedent to ensure river water will be freely drinkable. Based on Thomas MacDonough's vision, develop a post-colonial, multilingual, non-sectarian culture of radical change. Facilitate all citizens' involvement in a citizen-led politics from the bottom up. So that was just a little bit of where things are at the moment. So gone off on a bit of a tangent, but it all relates into where we're going with the core of this presentation today. So why are we developing an urban systems community practice? Okay, because there is no planet B. Sorry, no, I'm having problems. Okay. Okay. Sorry, it was a technical problem there. Okay, so why are we doing this? Because there is no planet B, as the scientists have pointed out, as the students on the streets have pointed out, as Greta has talked about. Fridays for Future developed, and it's on the table that we've got these big problems. So a little bit about the world we're working with. I'm working with Ecocity, Communities for Future, which is their action platform, and Urbana, which is an academic project for sustainable and just cities. So Ecocity is a meta-network of networks around Europe working in ecovillages, ecocities, transition towns, permaculture, and it's also got academic bases. The two main ones are Drift in Rotterdam and Faculty Science University in Lisbon, which I'm part of. They've developed this European Day of Sustainable Communities, trying to highlight the action that people are doing on the ground, as we've seen here for the last few years. Then also looking at policy and actually helping shape learning from these community groups in the margins, helping it shape policy and trying to work at all levels to bring about the change we need. Also then involved with the high level of things. That was the recent COP in Madrid. Myself and Juan del Rio represented Ecocity, bringing the voices of the community-led initiatives to the table, and also while they're connecting with indigenous groups in Latin America on relationships that we've been developing over some years. We also have the whole knowledge commons world where we're opening a space through our wikis to enable all people to participate in the co-construction of this knowledge base to help inform policy, to help bring about the system change we require. From that, the status report was produced in 2019. That was the first one. There you can see some of the 7 basic preconditions. Moving beyond growth, that's a key one that George Callis was talking about there some time ago in one of your previous webinars about degrowth. The commons, eco-social regeneration, solidarity economics, inclusive governance, transformative social innovation, and enabling community-led action. And if people are interested in these themes and you want to work on it, this is an open process. So people are presently organizing for the 21 publication. So that's all within the Communities for Future. Ecocity has got 4 different areas in terms of how it's reorganized in the last while. And that's feeding into where we're going. So the work I'm specifically doing is with Urbana. It's a 3-year Horizon 2020 project with 4 arenas. The third one, was just last week, Thursday and Friday in Berlin. And each of these arenas has a different theme to explore these issues of what is it, what does this mean, and how can we create sustainable and just cities? So there's a series of partners involved, but Ecocity and 3 of those partners are Ecocity members. So there's a strong Ecocity direction to this project. We're also looking at blended arenas, like this example of today's event. People are all in line together and connecting. So we can use these tools of communication in a better way. What we've been exploring is how we can do the online and the offline and make them work better together. So that's continual experimentation. So just some images from that, from previous arenas in Barcelona, the one last week. A community practice is a key to all this. So rings within rings of people who are active and trying to bring about this change. This is from Wheatley's emergence ideas, this idea of from building networks, then to actually developing the communities of practice on the different themes. And then from that's actually the system of influence that can bring about the system change that we require to deal with climate breakdown. So we've also got our knowledge commons. I'm going to go quickly through all this. We've had a series of community conversations. These are public events to hear the different voices of different groups, different people here in Lisbon talking about the realities on the ground, putting on film nights in Rotterdam with Drift, people tuning in from all over the world, different continents, and sharing insights and learning from and with each other, using social media, podcasts, participating in other festivals and urban conferences. And this is really trying to mix the discussion. So, a lot of time, one of the problems is we've got the ghettos or the silos. The academics are here talking with themselves, the activists are here, the eco-heads are here. They're all doing great things, but if we could actually learn to interact between each other a lot more, well, maybe we might start making the impact that we really need to make. So how are we doing this? How are we developing this urban systems community practice? So from Fridays of Future to Communities for Future. And this is trying to enable all people to participate in the process to make change in their own backyard from the bottom all the way up. Again, same knowledge commons. We're using Miro boards to develop our ecosystem. So working in this area here, which is the urban systems area. And that's kind of where it is at the moment in terms of building a landscape of who's there, who's doing what, the relationships between different groups. So this Communities for Future sessions, it's up and running. Again, these are all open. So if people are interested in participating, being part of it, helping shape it, helping make it go forward, that's the challenge. It's for us as communities to work together to bring about the change we want to see in the world. So that's the first part of the presentation. Now I'm going to go to the second part, which is more specific on the actual eco-cities. And this is hopefully working. So I'll just see, can people see that? Yeah, okay, I presume you can. So community-led eco-city transformation.
No, right now, I'm sorry, we don't see any slides right now.
Okay, sorry then.
Maybe you need to go on share.
Can you see it now?
Yes,
yeah?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for pointing that out, that critical little point. Okay, so everybody can see the slide. So again, so this is more specifically, that first part was more an introduction of the kind of wider systems that are enabling these kind of discussions. And now it's more specific into the actual work I'm kind of exploring through these systems, but also with the PhD work. So community-led eco-city transformation. So journeying to learn and do. Again, this is this idea of, I'm relatively new to academia. I've been an activist in ecological and post-capitalist systems for maybe about 20 years. So for me, the challenge is to try to see how these worlds can support and work with each other. So I'll just give you a little background of kind of my own sort of journey, how I've ended up here and sitting here in Lisbon, or outside Lisbon, on this nice sunny day today in spring. So back in about 2003, I was part of the EASA network. I'm an architect by training. We had European networks all over doing projects in different places. So in Banja Luka, in Bosnia, after the war, we were doing a project there and thinking about this idea of an ecocity. Then doing work in Dublin. This was part of my architectural thesis in 2005. And rather than just doing a theoretical, nice idea for a little square or something like that, it was actually an 18-kilometer long orbital loop for the city, the Botanic Spine. And the idea was that was actually could have a series of seed-like points that could grow. So not just being stuck in theory, we actually took it into the real world and tested, experimented. So making gardens, doing bike rides along the canals, which was illegal at that stage. And this was really trying to force law change, but as well bring communities to think about these things and to look about enabling this change. We eventually, the project grew, we had gardens, we got support from the deputy mayor at the time, things were happening. So it sparked some things. And most of the bikeway is now there, thankfully, especially to Andrew Montague, who was that ex-mayor. He did a lot of work in implementing a lot of the bike changes in about 2011. So Barcelona in 2009, moved to Barcelona in 2006. This is a community garden here, looking very much how culture and art play a big part in this. It's not just about making food, it's about processes which enable community connection, which can think about a better vision of a future and then make it. Even if they're not asked to do it, they're pushing first, like this is an illegal occupation in an abandoned space in a grassy neighborhood in Barcelona. But, hundreds of people coming together, eating together, playing music together, building the sort of world they want to see, and then dealing with legal issues, et cetera, to actually start making it happen. Also then, at that time, I was working with William McDonough, the city's buildings as trees and cities as futures, or buildings as trees and cities as forests, also the creator of Cradle to Cradle. We were doing projects with the group I was working in Barcelona, and this is just some of the work that we submitted to CADS, which was the Catalan Sustainability Advice Board, about this kind of greenways and bike systems and these kind of routes through cities to enable more public-friendly, walkable cities, food production, etc. Then moved to Curitiba in Brazil to learn about how the city was able to change and deal with a lot of the issues in the global south, dealing with huge challenges, but they did some wonderful things there. So that was an interesting few years there in Curitiba. My argument, and the one that are supporting the arguments made by others, that Curitiba, I think, really blossomed from a top-down process from the 70s to the 90s. In the 90s, then it kind of sat on its laurels, as people say. But then from about 2005-07 onward, these new citizen movements started to emerge, especially around bike activism, public engagement, and using artistic process. So a new kind of more bottom-up process. And that there was the bicycle square in Curitiba, which had been a pretty dodgy area, a no-go area, drugs problems, etc., etc. So you can just see some of the process. They use the mutirão, which is an indigenous word made its way into Portuguese, Brazilian, or Brazilian Portuguese, about a kind of collective work moment when people come together to do collective work, like mehel in Irish or minga in the more in Colombia and the old indigenous Peruvian areas as well. Also then these ideas of actually doing these actions in the streets to actually spark the wider change. So again, as an organized group, the Siglo do Sul, they did parklets, or little, occupations of spaces for a day. And then actually with policy change, they actually implemented some of these more urban spaces. So it's very interesting to see about, having an idea is one, it's definitely a big part of urban change, but then actually building a culture which is open and accessible, that people can really feel part of, and the creativity can make its way in, like hip hop artists and artists, etc., etc. Then we're doing some work in some of the favelas. There's still huge inequalities, and actually Curitiba, while I was there, went to one of the top list of top 50 most violent cities in the world. So it has its challenges. Maybe we can get into that if people are interested later on. But just some of the work we were doing there in Rio de Janeiro, in Rocinha, there with the Muturon. But then also looking at smaller kind of interventions, more kind of one little one here, people turning footpaths into food production zones, bringing local communities together. Again, looking at how old abandoned spaces can be used in a better way. So now to some of the ideas. So sustainability regeneration, as permaculture points out, we've three situations, three scenarios. We'd argue that you need to develop the creative descent. So we've gone way off the table in terms of how we're using resources and destroying the planet. We need to bring it back down to a limit of working within the planetary systems. So earth stewardship and creative descent, that's the base of permaculture. The regenerative design from Reed and in recent years, Daniel Wall have been saying that, sustainability isn't enough. We need to go way beyond to work with nature. The doughnut economics has come in the last while, and it's starting to really make an impact, finding the sweet spot of working with the social foundation at the base and the ecological at the ceiling. There is problems with the ecocity concept. It's had a weird kind of journey, but like when you see stuff like this, where in China, where bits of tree are stuck onto an old tree to make it look real. And this idea of it, it's these ecocity projects for the 1%, these gated communities. It's only a certain fraction of the super top end of society that can get into that, and that won't work. We need to find solutions for every single human together living in cities. So building on the work we're doing with the Ecocity and community-led initiatives, with the Global Ecovillage Network, taking their methodology and seeing how we can apply it to the urban realm. That's one of the challenges that I'm trying to explore. And they work with the 5 dimensions of sustainability. So the social, culture, ecology, and economy. And then an integral design, which weaves through all these different bits to enable the whole process to be, So, for example, with the Ecocity conference that was on some years back in Curitiba, we said, that's great, but not everybody has to go to the other side of the world to have a discussion. Wouldn't it be great if we could just open up and activate our local community and start exploring what matters to us with these themes, and then feed into in some sort of wider network sense? We created this 5-day program. We brought about 40 different groups in the city together to discuss themes. It happened in a series of different spaces, also more in the periphery, because the more well-to-do groups are very comfortable in their certain areas in the city centre, but maybe it's more of a challenge to go out to those more polarized or marginalized communities. But that's part of the challenge, and how we work together and understand the different perspectives. That's a huge part of the challenge. So taking this idea of how to actually, you put on these cultural festivals, to actually bring in, more participants, more everyday people who aren't academics or professionals in these areas. Anybody who's living in the city, we argue, should be part of these processes for making change. So looking at governance, who's making decisions? What processes are we using to make decisions? This might seem a bit strange, but linking back to the earlier text about the rivers in Ireland and stuff, this is actually one of the ideas we were looking at Curitiba. It was the idea of fractals. So a river system, you've got a series of rivers together, then you've got, say, one river basin, and within that you've got further river basins, and within that you've got further river basins. So actually we can actually scale right into our local little stream here and find out, well, what's that area around there? And that's the base. That's like base 1. And then the next one is at the next level, how that fits in with those other similar small little streams together into a small little tributary. And then the next one and the next one. And basically, if you're there in Curitiba, the water goes down, and then, in a few months or weeks later, it's going over that great big waterfall in Foz do Iguaçu, which many people hopefully have got to see. So, and this is looking at a garden project, a community garden project in Curitiba, and looking at an eco barrio for Curitiba. More recent academic outputs have talked about this thing. Lovely example here from Jamali Haider, looking at this kind of like this, I don't know, is it silting, or what you call the filters of this process of the ideas making their way down, down, down. So the fractal, the same dynamics, just it scales up and up. But rather than going from left to right, I'd be looking at and working with the groups we're looking with is actually how going from right to left here. So going from the micro and then making your way up to the next scale and then the bigger scale. So, but it's just a nice image. Sociocracy is a recent tool that's gaining lots of traction. Again, this fractal decision making, people are working in different circles, like what I showed you, ecologies earlier on, and then these groups organize. So as Helene pointed out, as part of the occupations in Barcelona in 2011, but again, similar structures. We had an assembly every night. There was like thousands of people in the squares for a few months. We had assembly every night, but there's a whole series of working groups, and those ones were further broken out into more subgroups. So again, this kind of, you're working in your little local group, but then the ideas make their way up to be shared in an open kind of horizontal process. And that occupation was really a very special moment. I think it was a spark which opened up an idea of a different way of doing things, especially how we engage in this democratic process. And actually going from peer to peer to square, the image on the left there, that's us in Barcelona watching a TV screen or a projector, and the person is speaking live from Syntagma Square in Athens in Greece. So there's got a different physical geographical communities having the same discussion, because we're all part of the same community that were affected by this economic crisis, and we're responding in kind of different ways. So this is part of this idea of global, now thinking local, but also global at the same time, and how you can actually work and be at all the different scales at the same time. And that's part of the challenges that we face. In Barcelona, that experience led to 2015, a massive shift with the rebel cities of Spain, where citizen movements actually took power in 8 municipalities, Barcelona and Madrid included. And from that, they developed the Fearless Cities Network, which is saying, it's not good enough to just change 1 or 2 cities. We need to change every city, and we need to build a network and offer tools and platforms and spaces to assist other communities make change. So basically the decision making was brought back down to the local. On the left there you have a picture of a Gracia neighborhood. There's a Barcelona Común discussion happening in the neighborhood. On the right then, it's an image from Barcelona, or from Lisbon, sorry. That's one of the groups we're working with in Barrio Segundo de Mayo and in Ajuda. But again, the governance, that people have their spaces, different sizes depending on your community, but about allowing everybody to be part of the decision-making process. That's the key to the governance. So Lisbon as an eco-city. I'm not going to go into all of this. Just some of the images, some of the work we've been doing with the Urbana project. Lisbon, as some of you probably know, was awarded the 2020 Green Capital Award. That doesn't mean it is the greenest city in Europe. It basically means that it's awarded for making a huge amount of changes for kind of nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So well done. And there's been brilliant transformation in the city. It still continues. It has been quite top-down. We'd questioned the level of participation, but at the same time, in recent years, there has been other shifts. The fact that it's labelled just recently the new European capital of gentrification and eviction. And that was before COVID. So part of that, we organized walks through the eviction neighborhoods, brought people together, from people working in the social movements to learn together, talking and trying to work out, what is the reality? What needs to be changed? How do we do it? Using art, and art as a part of the communication process is very important in all of these networks. So now we're started looking at 3 different groups. So we call it BAM, B for Bellaflor, A for Ajuda, and M for Marvila. This is Marvila. It was like the largest kind of shantytown or informal settlement until the 90s. And then you can see how they changed it. So the top right and middle right pictures was before and after. There's these massive tracts of green space that are, for the most part, just left. Sometimes you get goat herders still coming through, like on bottom right there. These more images of this. Then inviting people working in these areas like Res de Sean to talk about the images, talk about the work, talk about what they're doing. Just going to point out just this one example. So Transforma Marvila com Jardim Ciclavias. The local citizens weren't happy with the government proposals to put in yet more housing blocks. They'd been told for years that they're going to have green spaces. They felt neglected. The city was putting in bikeways and nice little parks in the kind of more well-to-do parts of the city. And they felt they weren't getting much. So they pushed for a park. So they basically took on the government and they won. So fair play to them. So these are just some of the kind of what these spaces look like. So I'm just going to go into some of the conclusions because I'm aware that we're going to finish up soon. So these conclusions are trying to bring these different bits together. It's still work in process. It's hopefully by the end of this year, it'll be finishing up in the PhD and the wider outputs. Thankfully, one output got first, a chapter was published there during the week. It was a nice kind of part of the whole St. Patrick's Day celebrations. And also then about a week or two before that was a chapter which goes into some of these examples in a little bit more depth. So I'll put those, I'll share them later on if people are interested in the readings. So just going to conclusions. Shifting from sustainable to regenerative practice combats climate breakdown while increasing social well-being for all of humanity. Degrowth criticises sustainability's relationship to perpetual quantitative growth on a finite planet. Permaculture's post-carbon pathway shows us where we must go. Doughnut economics gives us the compass to get there. Community-led initiatives hovering at the periphery become catalysts for system change when their communities of practice emerge with real power and influence to make old structures obsolete. Bridging activism and academia deepens science, gives transition tools to communities, and shapes climate emergency response policy. Fixing planetary urbanization requires global ecocity transformations. Regenerative planning enables nested communities blossoming to transform their worlds at all scales: backyard, neighbourhood, city. Scaling ecovillage approaches to ecocities demands locally owned participatory processes remain intact. Fractal-like, multi-scaled, community-led, bottom-up governance models to enable this already exist. Breaking through the windows of opportunity to remake our cities is everyone's business. Using whole systems approaches, regenerative systems identify leverage points to transform the way humans inhabit the earth. Active citizens become mutually evolving participants in their ecosystem through collaboration. When municipalities listen and open tools, knowledge, and experiences to the politics of everyday life, regenerative visions emerge from squares, assemblies, and gardens. Despite the hardships, Marvila fought, Marvila won. We can all be like Marvila. So there's no planet B. And thank you for the time. I'm coming up to half an hour now. So finishing up on this image, I'm a big Asterix fan. Obelix, one of my heroes. But this is kind of maybe one of the themes, you know, like why bother in all this stuff? Because that's really one of the big challenges, how to get the people who aren't part of this process on board. And I'd argue, and having spent time with lots of great people who are not just arguing, but making these changes, that by being part of a community is really amazing. Especially in the modern fractured world, that's the reconnecting is such a big part. So going back to the people like in this image, people coming together, eating together, drinking together, having parties, learning, having adventures, that's all part of it. So hopefully this has been clear. Hopefully it's been new, or maybe some ideas have been new for you. And I'd hope that some of you might want to participate in this adventure if you're not already doing so, and support the work of Ecocity and Communities for Future, and really try to act again as a deeper bridge between the local communities, the world of activism, and the academic. We all need to learn and work with each other to a far better way than we are doing, because we don't have much time. The challenges are big, but I'm convinced, along with others, that we'll get there. We're on the road. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Very uplifting presentation. I would like to first ask Ashley Colby if you could comment briefly. I know that that your work and Duncan's work have a lot in common. Would you like to comment on his presentation?
Yes, I would. And I just tried to start my video and it said the host isn't allowing me to. So if you want to start my video, feel free to let me do that. But you can hear me anyways. Yeah. Duncan, this is so great. I've been following your work since you've been posting on Scorai, and I could not agree more with everything you do. It lines aligns so much with all of my work and all of my hope about transformational change from the bottom up and from communities self-determining, being involved in, wait, Daniel's telling me my video might start now. Okay, wonderful. Communities being involved in the process of social change, and figuring out ways in which pro-environmental change is positive for their lives. And this can take diverse forms, and it should. My question to you is, I have been interacting with pretty, academic and policy and NGO level environmentalists for the past decade or so. And my sense is that many of them lean very heavily toward bottom-down policies, often international level coordination. And then they show, oftentimes in presentations will show graphs of climate change continuing to rise, and here's IPCC, and here's this report, and there's just more and more reports, and nothing is really changing. Yet they don't really want to take too much or take bottom up ideas too seriously, because they think, they're not enough. We need a bigger scale. We need top-down change. So has that been your experience also? And if so, how can we get these scientists and policymakers to understand the power of bottom-up change and use their power to help these initiatives? Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, great questions. Yeah, it's a huge, the people, I don't work very much in the policy end of things, just to point out from the start. But yeah, it's a common complaint we hear the whole time within policy, decision-making, the whole political process. No? So I think the example of Barcelona, I think that's a good example to start with. It's because, like in transition and different permaculture projects, we can ask authorities to do nice stuff for us. We're going, hey, we got this, we'd like to see this happen. Sometimes it happens. A lot of time it doesn't, and it didn't. People got fed up, people got frustrated, and finally people got to the point of just going, this is not working. We need to start taking greater control of this. And that's what they did. The citizen movements in Barcelona took power in 2015. A woman was the first time a mayor of the city in over 2,000 years, Ada Colau, doing fantastic work with the Barcelona Commune. But they realized that they couldn't just do it alone. And that's why the Fearless Cities Network is such an important thing. So that's kind of, I think, trying to activate citizens to, offer tools and a process to help them go forward. For example, in the Ecocity has from the outset realized that we need to make greater impact and bring the different actors together, but also a process to try to make it so it's not just, another report, put it on the shelf. So like at the moment, there's kind of those 4 different circles, one of them is policy. There's people like Mira and Celine, who are the main policy people in our team. And they've been doing a huge amount of work, and there's now a growing team around that. So like when we launched the Communities for Future, we had here in Portugal, we got one of our MEPs down. There was MEPs from local European politicians for non-Europeans. And they were coming to listen. These are people who are saying that they are worried about the climate breakdown, the climate emergency, and they really want to engage in an honest and open process to affect change. So I think they always need people on the street pushing and demanding the change. If you've got nobody demanding and looking for it, it's not going to happen. If you also don't have, what you're looking for, it doesn't happen. And that's also one of the problems. We can be good about pointing out what's wrong, but it's harder to point out, what could be right, and to actually develop positive visions. And that's where architecture, design, and planning come in, like in permaculture. So in terms of how to go forward, I'd encourage people to connect with the Communities for Future Policy Circle, to find out who's working in that, talk to them directly, learn from them, see what's working. And in our Urbana process on the sustainable and just cities, the third arena last week was about governance, but the next one is about policy, and it's exactly about this. So now we're kind of shifting the gear and looking at, how do we implement real change? And hopefully that will make some little bit of an inroad into policy for sustainable just cities in Europe. But for us, that still doesn't go far enough. We need to make this all over, and we need to bring everybody in to enable everybody to be part of this process. So I think this will come by developing this conversation in more fora through SCORI, with TNOC, with Ecocity, all these different groups. Find out who's there, who's already working, what the blockages are, and think together about ways we can go forward. So hopefully that answered your question.
I just want to take 1 minute to follow up, and then I'll give the floor to somebody else. That's such a great answer. And I see Philip is also asking a similar question, and hopefully you can answer that as well. But briefly, I was in a conference with Paul Ehrlich, the preeminent environmentalist, yesterday, and asked this question. And his response was, we're out of time. We need international top-down policy. And I just think we're out of time. We need policy that makes sense and interacts with bottom-up change. So it's just really funny that those two perspectives seems to be coming to a head at this moment in history. My idea for getting academics involved is if they see this bottom-up stuff going on, building teams to understand how it works and systematically working with studying these bottom-up initiatives, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then aggregating that information, sharing it horizontally, I think could be extremely powerful. But the academics have to first see the bottom-up initiatives as really powerful agents for social change, as opposed to right now, they're kind of stuck in the frame of it's got to be top-down policy first. So, okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, well, just to follow that up, it didn't really come through so much. So the work I'm doing is participative action research. So, but in Curitiba, that was working with about 30 different local initiatives. Pretty full-on situations for some of them, like Teto working in the favelas outside Curitiba, and now here in Lisbon with these three BAM, the three city initiatives that are working around food and also marginalized communities. But yeah, it's a challenge. But I think the academic process needs to also kind of take a greater step forward. It's not enough, because there's a lot of mistrust from the community activism world with the academic process. You hear they come, they say we're cool, they check it out, they write a report, they never say anything again. It seems to be very one way. So to actually bring the amount of learning and the resources that are there to help these communities go even further, that's part of it. But then to actually not just to be, looking objectively far, no, to be part of these movements. If you can be part of everything, but if there's ones that you are part of, then and hopefully get more people from those communities or movements that they start getting to that. Like, for example, some Indigenous friends in Kangang, Guarani in Brazil, studying law and becoming lawyers so they can change the system through the system.
Thank you. This is really, you answered not only Ashley's question, but also Philip Vergraeg's question about what can academics do. I can't help but think about the process in which I am involved right now as a reviewer of proposals to a particular funding source about a transformation of cities. And every proposal, literally every proposal that I have seen is essentially top-down idea. There is no mention at all in any of the, not even mention of any bottom-up movements. It's really striking, right? The ideas come from people in the policymaking profession in those cities. And these are international cities, which brings me to a question that Tom Abeles has. Tom, can you speak, unmute yourself and pose your question personally? No, I guess maybe not. Okay, so I will speak on his behalf. How does this work get to the developed world, particularly large urban settings where the culture is different? Culture, and I would add personally, and circumstances are very different. Take, the wealthy cities of the developed world. They, of course, have the same areas that Curitiba had, where of underserved communities and neglect and so on. But for the most part, and certainly the central part of these cities and those who are in power create very different circumstances.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So as you saw from the presentation, some of it was coming from developing world, if you want to call it that. So from work done in Curitiba in Brazil. Also, my mother-in-law, my wife is from Peru in the Andes. My mother-in-law lives up in Ayacucho, the old Inca world, and also referencing some of the indigenous wisdom and magic now in terms of the relationship with rivers. Like the legal court case from the Maori community took 140 years. So yes, their contexts are very, very different. Just now, before tuning in today, I was listening to Rob Hopkins from the Transition Movement, his What If podcast. Basically, it was with Indigenous leaders from the Aborigines in Australia and a woman from Indigenous American from the United States today. But basically, it was like, can Indigenous wisdom save the world? and I very much think that it can, because as I tried to point out with the first bit there on the Regenesis, I feel where all these kind of ecological movements are going, it's like we're moving definitely, but we're not going to somewhere totally new. No, we're going back to somewhere where we all were a long time ago, living in a way that respected the natural systems of the earth. We knew our place, we celebrated that. So I think the shift is the ones more advanced in this modern industrialized society. They are the ones that need to really see the damage that they're causing in this planetary destruction or climate breakdown. And yeah, they're all different contexts. Just to give you two that I didn't go into today, but I'm part of also the Municipalities and Transition Network, which is a transition project. One of those 5 pilot projects is in Sao Paulo, the Villa Mariana network in our community. Municipality. It was one of the 32 municipalities of Sao Paulo. That's over 20 million people. And they're actually got the city council incorporating sociocracy now. They're doing organizing a huge amount of work. And it's dealing with, there's favelas, there's tough places, there's different rates of equality, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just one example. And another example, and again, the way they work is from the house, the block, the neighborhood, and then the network between all these different communities. And it's all done with heart, because it's also a peace initiative dealing with the inequalities that are there. So that's just one, this kind of fractal or governance process. And very similar in a kind of totally different way is the Rojava example in Syria, in the war that's gone on in Syria, the multi-sided civil war. So the Kurdish peoples have had a feminist and an anti-capitalist revolution, and they've also built up a process of governance. They call it Tekmil, and it goes again, the block, the street, or the street, the block, the neighborhood, and again, it's these levels of decision making. So they're just two. There's many, many more. If you go onto the Global Ecovillage Network, for example, they're doing fantastic work. A lot of it is nothing new. They actually signed 7 memorandums of understanding with African countries after the last COP in Madrid, to explore how to bring in regenerative processes and to work with communities in a way that is not following the Western model, because so far the Western model has shown that we're not working. Okay,
thank you very much. I would like to follow with a somewhat skeptical voice from Vicky Sontag. Vicky, can you be unmuted? No, I suppose the whole system doesn't allow that. Okay, so I will read her comment. My own experience with sociocracy governance in an eco-village raises a lot of questions about how much it relies on a white, privileged, hyper-individualism. What are you learning from working across differences? How are you discerning how inclusive these projects really are? I think you hinted at this in how difficult it was to engage people. I'd like to add that's very similar to the question I wanted to ask you is, how do you get people who are very comfortable at this point with the status quo to participate in a movement that wants to overcome the status quo? I mean, that's, and usually these are the people who have access to power. So please, if you can give a relatively short answer so that there is, we can give voice to another couple of people. Okay.
Yep. So starting off with your last question, as people argued that the last 20, 30 years, the eco way of guilting people into making change doesn't work. It doesn't work. No. I believe you really need to create a fantastic adventure that everybody can participate in, and that they're excited and they're attracted to it, and it's appealing at all the different levels. So for example, myself, my mother was from a farm. She was sent off the farm. My uncle's still there. Trying to in the Irish context, how the ecological thinking can relate to farmers is so difficult. So understanding the needs and the dynamics of different communities is a big part of that. How you talk with people matters. How you ask questions, how you respect people, how you treat people with dignity. That's a huge part. Not in a superficial way, but to understand who they are, what they are, where they've come from, where they're trying to get to and what's holding them back. And if you can do that, then you're halfway down that road. If what you're doing makes sense to them, maybe it makes sense in an economic sense. Maybe it goes, oh, this might actually make my life a bit better. That's an appealing factor as well. So, but yeah, the example I give, and that's why I put in the gardens from Barcelona, people were passing the garden going, what are all these weird hippies doing? And then eventually they took the step going, I don't know what you're doing, but this looks so much wholesome and brilliant. And I just like to learn more and have my kids play here as well. No? And when the kids start playing together, you're winning. So to answer Vicky, first of all, I don't live in an eco-village. I visited a few different ones. And I think there are huge problems in the eco movement because it's privilege and stuff like that. I think, as I've mentioned, we need to get out of our ghettos, and how we do that is not by asking everybody who's different, like the marginalized groups, to come to our thing. No, we need to go to all the other things that are going on with all those other communities and understand what they need first and foremost. When you understand what they're fighting against or fighting for, and then see how you and your movement can support them, then they're further down the road. And that includes the academics supporting them as well. Different eco-villages have different necessities. Some want to be closed, need to be closed because they're dealing with people who've coming from trauma or whatever, Then there's others like the one we're working with in Ireland, Clough-Jordan, which is intentionally trying to open up and make urban change and to become a model for wider kind of bubbles of change. So respecting the core group is one thing, but I'd hold that a lot of the eco world is pretty elitist, pretty closed, and very difficult if you're not connected. There's a whole thing of who are you, like where are you on the chart or on the list or whatever. If you're not important enough, you're not really invited. And that goes against, I think, the essence of what we should be trying to create. The learnings across different differences. Every place is different aspects, different viewpoints, different knowledges and challenges. Learning the language wherever you're going helps a lot. Don't just go there with your white English speaking, but try to find ways that local groups and people can really let their work and their insights shine. So giving space to those of difference. That's something that we always try to do. So if there are marginalized groups in our networks, which there are plenty of, that they might get somewhat more of an unbalanced amount of speaking time because they're not getting as much balance in the wider realm. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's enough for that.
Thank you, Colin. So let me make a comment. It seems to me that that eco gardens and urban agriculture may be the kind of activity that can appeal across class differences and cultural differences, much more so than, let's say, new types of construction and new kinds of built environment, which allows for more affordable housing and so on. I think those would be much more controversial and would not bring everybody together. So it's very interesting that you're working through gardening and agriculture. Now, Colin Sage has a comment back to the role of academics. Here, I will read this comment. There is a pivoting underway in some universities towards communities, but in a way that essentially reinforces academic practice, winning research funds, data extraction, writing academic papers. It's not simply a question of getting academics involved, but those with a mindset not wedded to advancing their careers. Now, here is a challenge, right? Through food, for example, one way to do this is through helping cities create policy councils that provide an interface between communities and local authorities. We had some success with this in Cork. So this is really essentially a commentary on the work. Yeah. Would you like to?
Yeah. Could you post that question in the chat, because I can't see the question. It's just helpful to be able to read the question. But I'll try to respond.
You don't see it in the chat?
No. The last one I have is from Philip in Corella.
Oh, well, I don't know.
If anybody could just repost it, if you can just copy paste it, it would be helpful.
Yeah, but it's essentially
it's come through there. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. We'd agree. Again, to talk with the people, the main editors of that status report, Gilles Peñalops and Tom Henfrey, who I work with. If you get to know them and see the work they're doing, that's you'll understand the world that they're fighting against, maybe. And that's why the commons is so important, the knowledge commons. So that, I think, is the direct response. By opening up a process that is open to all, it becomes a tool for all, and it's all there for everyone to co-work, co-shape, and we're just bringing all that as part of one part of a circle into the policy, and hope that it's in a way that can start making the change. That's only one side of things. The other stuff is that the different movements have access to this knowledge, and they're learning between each other. So translocal learning, be that through academics or communities, is also so important. So yeah, food, helping cities create policy councils, like we had some success with this in Cork. Yeah. If that's Cork and Ireland, which I imagine it is, there's lots of great things in Cork, especially West Cork. One of the donut groups is getting up, and donut economics group is up and running now from Cork, and so some of the art groups are there. So leaving the academic question, I think I've answered that, and going to the food policy and councils. I think that the more you can activate local communities to becoming part, engaging in the process and the discussion, to then actually saying, this is what we want. If you really have that, then that helps. I think the big challenge is to get more and more people on the side of, the voice from the streets, as I'd call it in sort of the municipalist or the fearless cities kind of movements. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. Colin, if it doesn't answer, please send another chat message. There is also a question from Tom D'Alessio. How will you adjust your approach to a post-COVID world?
Yeah, the continuing on the way we're going, basically, because our argument is COVID is one of these manifestations of climate breakdown. Like, we're destroying our living system so much that eventually it is going to crash. So we're seeing already some bits of that. If anybody has seen the recent What If, and it's still going on with the transition network, brilliant bounce forward, not bounce back to where we were, but to bounce forward where we think it's even better to get to. And that's been going on for a few weeks. So there's serious things. One is to not go back to business as usual, go back to something, or go to something far better. What is that far better? Well, we'd argue a post-capitalist, ecological living in harmony with the natural systems, as is outlined by permaculture, doughnut economics, degrowth, etc., etc. There's many different names for it. You know, it's trying to, like, I consider myself part of all those different movements, but, you know, even in these movements, we see ghettos. Degrowth, don't talk to transition. These groups don't talk to these groups. They all need to come far better together. And they're the ones who are supposedly already on board. But in terms of going forward, I think through COVID, we've identified what really matters. Community, being there together for the ones we love, dealing with tough things. Yeah, how to move forward, resources, where money is going or not going. Yeah, there's also, I think it's important to point out that in many countries, this weekend there was violence in Germany, in Rests in Dublin. We're seeing this like anti-vaxxing and anti-COVID, this kind of conspiracy theory world growing. And I think that's really, it's a dangerous thing that we need to address, because in eco circles especially, we're seeing you know, the far right are getting involved, the eco-fascism, the killings in Christchurch. So I think that we need to be even more explicit that there is no space for racism, hate, and extremism of those sorts in any of these ecological movements, because we have to respect diversity of our species with other species and the different communities that make up our species.
Yeah. Thank you, Duncan. Well, our time is up. I want to remind everybody that the video of this presentation and discussion will be posted on the SCORI website. And I want to thank you very much, Duncan, for a fascinating presentation, and to the attendees for insightful comments and questions. That concludes our event today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I'll share links in the presentations if people want to watch them as well, or get them. If people want to carry on the conversation, hopefully SCORI can share the links and follow us up, get involved, participate. You know, it's there. So thank you very much. And viva la Pachamama.
Bye-bye.